Hello and welcome to Take Two, the programme that takes a look behind the news. I'm Ian Henshall. Today we review the past year and make some predictions for 2014. But first I've got a special guest here in the studio, Catherine Hamnett, who's been looking into the Fukushima disaster. And if you notice anybody running around on the floor, that's Arthur. Catherine, you've been looking into Fukushima. You've got a well known as being somebody who's concerned about environmental issues. I mean, how bad is the Fukushima disaster, just to give us a general picture?
Unbelievably bad. Global catastrophe. Can I say more? Utterly underreported by the Japanese media, Japanese government clampdown, betrayal of the Japanese people. I don't know how bad it can, how bad you could say, but starting off bad for Japan. If anything goes wrong with removing the fuel rods and the dilapidated and collapsing Pond 4 cooling tower at the Daiichi plant, it could wipe out the Northern Hemisphere. I mean, it's hard to say how bad it is. I mean, even if that doesn't happen, it's belching out hundreds of gallons of radioactive water daily into the Pacific Ocean, heading straight for the west coast of America. And all the governments, the Japanese government, the Canadian government, the American government, the UK government, are underplaying how severe this is. It's unbelievable global cover-up that's going on right now.
And you've identified the mechanism by which they do this as a secret or a very little known agreement?
Well, yes. I mean, because everybody's asking, like, why is this being underplayed? Why the American government? And in actual fact, I think the nitty-grit is there's a gagging order between the World Health Organization and the International Atomic Energy Agency, dated May the 28th, 1959, which is about when all the Pacific testing started. At the 12th World Health Assembly, the agreement states, whenever either organisation proposes to initiate a programme or activity on a subject in which the other organisation has or may have a substantial interest, the first party should consult the other with a view to adjusting the matter by mutual agreement. And continues, the IAEA and the WHO recognise that they may find it necessary to apply certain limitations for the safeguarding of confidential information furnished to them. They therefore agree that nothing in this agreement should be construed as requiring either of them to furnish such information as would, in the judgment of the other party possessing the information, interfere with the orderly conduct of its operation. Which means that basically the WHO cannot release any information that would be regarded as damaging the interests of the IAEA, and the IAEA's interest is the promotion of civil nuclear energy.
Totally, yeah.
And so this actually, if you were wondering why,
the WHO doesn't say anything about it.
Yeah, and also our governments kowtow with this. I mean, for instance, like in the UK, we've had the Irish Sea, which has been the most nuclear polluted sea in the world before Fukushima. The British government was not testing, or the the Department of the Environment was not testing seafood.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, if it tests, it won't test resident; it'll test migrant, like cod.
Migrant fish only tested.
Migrant fish only.
Honestly.
Right now, America, you've got a direct current leading from Japan. It's hitting the west coast, and it goes both ways along the west coast of America. You've got the Environmental Protection Agency, which is not testing seafood.
Yeah, they've stopped testing things,
but you've got starfish collapse, you've got seal colonies, 98% of the young seals of this recently have died. You've got lesions showing up on seals, on walruses, hair loss, polar bears, same thing, and Alaskan Airlines air crews with similar symptoms to polar bears. And the Alaskan Airlines are saying, oh, this is something that's been sprayed on their uniforms. Well, in a continent that sues for everything, why aren't they suing?
Yeah.
I mean, it's terrifying.
The American courts are much more controlled than appears. We did another
Well,
story
it's just,
about
it's a
this.
clampdown. The EPA is not testing.
Yeah.
It's still not testing seafood. Americans are eating seafood that hasn't been tested. I mean, there's a lot of nuclear scientists who are saying, you know, gone are the days that you'd eat anything from the Pacific.
Thanks very much, Catherine. That's all quite a worry, and it's interesting that at least there's somebody out there campaigning energetically.
Well, there are loads of people campaigning. Thank you very much for having me, and I hope that, you know, more people will get on the case.
Catherine Hamnick gave us a much longer interview than the few minutes you've just seen, and that's going to be available soon. It was pretty frightening, I think we can all agree, and what a pity that the media here seems to be engaged in a cover-up of the nuclear industry, and how astonishing that the World Health Organization is obligated not to publish information about Fukushima, or perhaps indeed Fallujah as well. Anyway, we're now looking at the year gone, and I've got Bob Kidman here, and I've got Roy Hunter, and they're going to give us their brief takes on what happened last year. Let's start with you, Bob.
Oh, hi. Looking at the stories of 2013, they seem to culminate in one thing, and that's really the world's top 300 richest getting richer by over $500 billion, according to Bloomberg. This is the classic shift of wealth from public to private pockets. Our cost of living rises through the increase of logistics, plastics, energy prices, service, etc. We're told this is unavoidable. Yet corporations publish year-on-year record profits, especially the big six consortiums. Since 9/11 and more recently the 2008 recession, corporation profits have ballooned coincidentally along with our cost of living. It reminds me in part of the General Smedley Butler speech, War is a Racket, which was published in 1935, and quotes there being over 21,000 new million and billionaires after World War I in US alone.
War is a Racket. That was General Smedley Butler. He was an American general who was approached to conduct a coup against Roosevelt, as far as I remember.
Well, he was the most decorated general.
And they asked him to conduct a coup against the Washington government, didn't they?
That might be true.
Yeah, no, he did. I recall that. He put it all in his memoirs. He turned them down, and the unspoken history is that there nearly was a coup in the 30s. Of course, a lot of people think that 9/11 was effectively a coup, or the assassination of Kennedy, but that was the first one, and it's much more. There's lots of reason to believe it's true based on Smedley Butler's comments. Yeah, a racket for money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely.
Well, capitalism is a racket for money, isn't it? And as we can see from the statistics you just gave us, then you know it's the march forward of capitalism, isn't it? Capitalism has to make more and more money every year to survive. So
Well, by law.
by law,
By law,
yeah.
companies have to. They're obliged to do the best possible thing within the law for their shareholders.
Yeah.
That's what I.
But you know it's not going to get any better, is it? You know, until we stop them, you know, this march is just going to go forward and forward. As you say, the rich are going to get richer, and the poor are going to get poorer.
Well, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which is coming through at the moment, it's only going to get worse and worse as you've got the US and the UK doing trade agreements which by all intents and purposes are secret. They will go past the EU making that redundant. So it'd be interesting to see what the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership does and what's going to come from it. It's supposed to be harmonising free trade, so it's only going to be harmonising through the elite companies and the multinationals involved in it, which will probably squeeze out the smaller businesses, the self-employed and that sort of people.
Who can't afford lobbyists.
But from I don't know too much about the TTIP.
The TTIP.
TTIP. But the point that strikes me out of all that is that part of this is that the corporations are going to get legal parity with the nation states.
Well,
so
if not above parity with the
well,
nation states.
not yet. I think they're coming in legal parity with the nation states.
the TTIP will
sure
give them
further.
governance over countries, because the countries will have to get their legislation, their prices, their infrastructure in line with, we'll have to get ours in line with the US and vice versa, which will take precedent over existing legislation.
Is it going to have one of these deals whereby if a country, for instance, decides to ban nuclear power, they can then get prosecuted in a tribunal by a nuclear power company for compensation?
I haven't read that, but I would have thought it would be along the lines.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. Right? This is secret.
It's so secret.
This is secret. I mean, you know, we're the information we do know, I think, has come through Edward Snowden quite a lot, and other leaks as well.
Okay, look, we've got a busy agenda here. Roy, can you haven't had a chance yet to mention what you see as the big event the major events of last year?
Well, to me, the Iran and Syrian peace deal really is the biggest events of 2013. Largely because we've seen a crack in their facade, really, as far as I'm concerned. Not going to war in Syria, I think, was one of the most exciting and important events, really, of the last few years. It might not be what it looks like on the surface. You know, we can see things still. The chessboard, the pieces are still moving.
Richard Gott, who gave that speech outside number 10 Downing Street when people were blocking the road, I happen to know him, and he was saying that he can't remember in his lifetime, he's quite an old guy as well, and he can't remember in his whole lifetime. And he's actually written a book, he's written a very, very authoritative book, Richard Gott, on the various rebellions against the British Empire. He's an academic. And he can't remember any time in his lifetime when there's been such a success for the anti-war.
Yeah, but I mean, it's surprising, isn't it? Because there weren't actually that many people out on the street, were there, against the Syrian war?
I think there would have been.
Well, I think there was a lot of lobbying for people emailing their MPs and.
But you know, I mean, if you consider we had up to 2 million people on the street for the Iran war, the Iraq war, I beg your pardon. Freudian slip there.
We all lose track of the war.
Don't worry about that. But up to 2 million people on the street, and that didn't stop them, did it? And there weren't that many big demonstrations against Syria. So But anyway, on the face of it looks good, and it's a thing to celebrate, I believe.
And Iran, are you taking this as a serious peace talks, or is it just to soften us up for another?
Well, I don't really know, to be honest with you. I'm a bit confused now because. It seemed that Obama was quite sincere about that, but AIPAC's been lobbying
the Israeli lobbying,
American Israel. They've been lobbying, and a lot of senators, both Republican and Democrats, are coming across now and
against Obama.
Against Obama, and of course it's the usual suspects. It's McCain and Graham, who are just pushing for war. And
quite a lot of people a lot of people don't know. Apparently, they haven't told their constituents that they've been voting up for war against Iran. No, apparently not. That's what the Real News was saying anyway. The Real News is another reliable news source, or semi-reliable.
So these things are looking very good on the surface, but they're not done deals yet by any means. But
so it's 50-50 on Iran, but there's grounds for hope.
Well, I think it's more than that. I think it's 70-30, but it's still not a done deal. But that's the good news from 2013. 2014, we'll see whether that good news comes to fruition.
Well, next we'll be looking at the future, or our attempt to look at the future. Thanks very much, Roy. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Well, that was the year that's gone, and the slightly optimistic possibilities for geopolitics and pessimistic ones for the economy. And now we're going to look at the year ahead, 2014. Obviously nobody can predict the future, but we're going to try. So Bob, let's start with you. Bob Kidman here and Fran Anderson. Bob,
thank you.
Let's start with you.
Mine continues along the similar lines of Roy, really. I think the big plays this year are going to come from Vladimir Putin. Everything is going to be centred around the Dead Sea and maybe East Africa. Putin's head of the G8 for 2014.
That's an official. Sorry to interrupt. That's an official position, is it?
Yeah, he's
a rotating chairmanship or something.
He's Russia's host for the year. That started on New Year's Day, and he sets the agenda for the year.
Oh, okay.
So he set a 5-point plan, which is obviously very globalist, but part of that includes a united fight against terrorism. He's had Volgograd. Just before the new year, the bombings on the bus and in the station, which afterwards he's vowed to annihilate terrorism. For Putin to say something like that, I would probably take note of that. The reason why I think the Dead Sea is going to be involved and there's going to be a big political place this year is because there's lots and lots of things happening from different areas, different companies, different countries, all around that particular area.
There's a sort of centering in of the sort of what would you call them, the predators? If businesses.
Yeah, there's a lot of individual acts going on that seem to make a whole.
Right.
Which I found it quite interesting. I mean, you wouldn't think the Dead Sea there'd be anything going on there, but if you Google the Dead Sea and see what comes up, it's a little bit astonishing. Some of the things that are going on. I mean, there's major pipelines that are going through Turkey, under the Black Sea, through Romania and Bulgaria and the coastal regions just around there. Of the Black Sea. There's 4 oil fields that are going to be drilled there, which is with Petrom, which is a Romanian company linked with US giant ExxonMobil. I think Total are in there somewhere as well. Cargill, they're buying a 25% stake in a port.
Cargill are a massive commodities importer, exporter, trader, aren't they?
Yeah, they deal with infrastructure and wheat and grain and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
They have their hand in quite a few.
A lot of wheat and tea and sugar and things like that. Yeah.
Obviously, you've got the Sochi Olympics, which are on this coast, on the west coast, which is a great opportunity to increase surveillance, to get a militarised zone working, and they're also having the G8 summit there as well. So there's lots of increased surveillance and things like that. Russia's also beefing up its stealth submarine quota within the Dead Sea. I don't know why they need stealth submarines in the Dead Sea, but apparently they do. They're also negotiating with Ukraine that sits at the top of it to increase their fleet. Their naval
Ukraine, right? Because Ukraine's been a bit of a hot spot, hasn't it?
Gas prices and things.
Well, you know, they nearly had a civil war there, don't they? They were right on the brink.
That seems to come hand in hand, I think, with this sort of subject.
Destabilisation. The nightmare would be a democratic government that demands a high price for its oil. That's what they never have, isn't it? They got rid of when that happens.
So what I think, bearing in mind those sort of points and feels that I'm making in a minute, I think the war on terror is shifting from the Middle East. I think they've got what they wanted out of there. I think things are in place there quite well. I think that's going to come round to Eastern Europe. Turkey, there's been lots of destabilisation. There's a pipeline going straight through Turkey. There's 2 pipelines coming, also there's a few pipelines coming through Romania and Moldova, Bulgaria, and also through Dagestan, which is the origins of the people that did the Volgograd bombings. There's also a pipeline coming across the top of the Caspian Sea as well, and it all seems to be joining up nicely globally.
In somewhere around Romania,
yeah,
who just happen to be having their borders opened with the EU. I don't know if you see anything since.
Well, that's what got me onto this, because it's been playing in my mind for a while. Why Romania? Why are we getting forced this information about it? Why Bulgaria? And then I sort of found out where they were ignorantly. I didn't know. But also I found some other reports that suggest that Hillary Clinton is pushing through 3,000 old MEK terrorists, which is the Mujahideen, which I think Iran. So you've got the borders opening here to Britain for refugees, but the Romanians don't know why they've done it. So the Romanians, the Brits are saying, yeah, that's brilliant, but we don't want to go anywhere.
Okay, but this is getting a little bit speculative,
yeah.
Let's face it. Okay, Bob, well, thanks for that. Now we'll go on to Fran Anderson, and you've been looking at the financial crisis. You think this is going to, ongoing ramifications?
Definitely. Yes, we will continue to experience the effects of the 2008 financial crisis. There'll be an increase in homelessness, poverty, crime, addictions, mental breakdowns, and this is across Europe, America and Britain. And there'll be a rise in what's called the precariat, which are those people who have no regular stable income, and quite often they're on 0 hours contracts. And there'll also be a rise in fascist groups such as the EDL, the English Defence League, and in Greece we've seen the Golden Dawn, and I think that's going to be a trend across Europe, possibly America as well, because it's very reminiscent of the 1930s, because Webster Tarpley does a comparison of that, and so did Ken Loach in his film Spirit of 45, that we are actually experiencing similar social breakdowns after the 1930s. We're experiencing very similar ones here.
We're in a cycle. Those things come around again.
Yes, and we're going to have a housing bubble thanks to the UK government's Help to Buy scheme. All it takes is the interest rates to rise, and people are going to end up defaulting on their mortgage and getting repossessed.
It does seem one of these acts of complete insanity. And you can, I mean, I dare I say that you can tell when the government's had a moment of complete insanity, because the BBC starts tactfully raising objections in the politest possible way, and you've got to sort of read between the lines. But the BBC's quite worried about this. They're constantly mentioning how some people are saying that this will put house prices up, as if it could do anything but put house prices off, and we've got enough Russian oligarchs buying houses in London, haven't we?
Exactly,
Sorry,
yeah.
I think that's the interesting thing. On the, I think it's the 7th of February, the US re-looking at their debt ceiling. Obviously, you've got all the brinkmanship and everything that happened last year, but I'd be interested to see our boost in housing and getting everyone to buy houses and things, and interest rates and things, see how that's affected when the next round of talks come on with the US and their debt ceiling.
How would that work? The debt ceiling rise would help inflate prices?
Well, you've got, I think a recession will come on the back of it. I think something's going to break. I'm not entirely sure what, but you've got 60% of that debt, of the 17 trillion or whatever it is now, is owned by
the Fed.
Well, it's owned by Russia, China, Japan.
The foreign debt, yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, they're in an unsustainable position, and that will have counteracts.
Well, it does seem to be a sort of a gun pointed at their heads, and just because nobody's pulled the trigger yet doesn't necessarily mean that they won't ever do.
Yeah.
And people say that China's dependent on America, so they can't dump their dollars, but you know, maybe they're a bit cleverer than that. They've been building up quite a lot of gold, I gather. Anyway, Fran, you were saying?
Yes, I mean, the UK government is going to scrap housing benefit for under 25-year-olds as part of their 25 billion cuts package. We've released 12 million from welfare, and it's absolutely crazy. This is an insane policy. Where are those under 25 supposed to go? I mean, some of them could even be parents of children themselves. And at the same time, this government has outlawed squatting of residential properties, and now they're talking about outlawing squatting of commercial properties. So where are the homeless people supposed to go when we have a rise of repossessions because of the housing bubble that might burst, and we also have more young people possibly being evicted because they have no longer any access to housing benefit? Where are they supposed to go?
How about cleaning up houses, abandoned houses in Liverpool, and feeding on the rats? But I guess that would be sort of self-sufficiency, wouldn't it? Maybe they want that sort of enterprise by the young people. I'm only joking.
Well, I don't blame you for joking, because cuts actually kill, and cuts are killing now, and they're going to kill more. And this government knows this, and they simply do not care. And this is an absolute travesty. Britain is one of the richest countries in the world, and yet there are people in this country dying right now
of hunger.
Of hunger, because some of them are only left on £50 a week benefit money. I mean, that shouldn't be tolerated in a civilised society.
That wouldn't even cover your gas and electric.
When you're saying that people, really have to choose between heating, and an opinion poll showed that they had to choose between heating and food. Quite a lot of people said that they did have to sometimes choose between heating and food.
Yeah, between eating and heating, and that shouldn't be the case in the richest country in the world. So I think it's going to be cruel Britannia in 2014. However, I'm hoping that we're going to start seeing a rise of more solidarity, with people working together across religious, national, ethnic, economic, gender and other divides. And we can take heart from Greece, where they've formed local self-help groups, and I think we're going to have to perhaps maybe think of doing the same here. There is a growing international movement that wants a fairer society and a more sustainable economy. So I'm hoping that is going to continue to rise, that movement, in 2014.
Well, thanks very much, Fran. I don't know what you think about that, Bob.
I think that sounds like a fair estimate. I think it's a worrying situation. People can't afford to pay their bills. Going back to what we said earlier, with infrastructure going up, services going up, everything costing more and more and more, it's unsustainable.
Wages have gone up slower than prices for years now.
Pay cuts, really.
Yeah,
Inflation compared to savings, compared to income.
Yeah. And all they can offer us is the right, they'll lend you a little bit of money to buy a house.
Which we'll pull the rug away from.
Well, thanks very much, Fran Anderson. Thanks, Bob Kidman. And we'll thank you for watching, and we'll see you with the next episode of Take 2 on The People's Voice sometime next week. Thank you very much.